Hey everybody, it's Selena Rifkin here. Jason is on vacation. He is offline. He is off the grid. He has no phone. So it's just me today, and I'm here with Dawn Mattos, who is gonna tell us about January 6th because she was there. And I've been really looking forward to having this conversation because what better than to have someone who was there? And we have someone, so she's going to tell us about that and anything else that she wants to tell us about. How you doing today, Dawn?
Excellent. Well, hello. Thank you for having me, Selena.
Mm.
So, my name is Dawn Mattos, and I reside in Griswold with my husband and my two grown adult sons with two beautiful grandbabies. I have a new one coming in October. So, very blessed in that arena. And yeah, I started compiling some of my January 6th memorabilia because my intention, now that fast forward everything that's happened since J6, I want to be able to tell a story for my grandchildren one day.
Mm.
And I often think it's probably like the hippies in the 60s and 70s, right? Woodstock that the grandparents, get to wear their tie-dye shirts and tell their kids and grandkids about their being a rebel back then, I guess. But yeah, January 6th, I don't know if you remember, but President Trump pushed really hard for people to be there. Um, his marketing was pretty effective because I found that the buses that went down from Norwich at the commuter parking lot were, I would say, 75% women.
Well, so
Yes.
let's back up a
And
little bit. What
yeah,
made you want to go? What made you even think about going?
I just, President Trump was talking about many topics. He was talking about the corruption throughout the country. He was talking about the election, irregularities. Even though he won, he was still exposing the problems within the election system. And so that always piqued my interest. He was always talking about fake news and being somebody that grew up right during Barbara Walters, Walter Cronkite, all of our famous Paul Harvey, real journalism.
Right.
When you compare that to what we have now,
Mhm.
it wasn't until President Trump started really focusing on educating us that our systems are broken from whether it be through journalism or what we see on TV, um, how the news is getting to us. The actors, really, they're playing a role, right?
Mhm.
Because they have an agenda that's usually anything anti-Trump is their agenda.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until President Trump started to expose a lot of that stuff that I started opening up my eyes a little bit, paying a little bit more attention, but not fully. I had a life.
Yeah.
um, I didn't really pay much attention to politics or TV. I wasn't really a big TV person, but it was how he marketed January 6th and with some of the corruption and key people in politics that had me wondering what he was talking about. It was more curious. And I loved his policies. I loved his message on um, just moving the country forward. And, it was the first time that I realized the division because I used to be a Democrat. I was a Democrat and voted for the Republican president.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until he gave his speech when Pelosi got up and tore up um, the program on television that I was so disgusted by that. I I went in the next business day and changed my affiliation because I was already starting to align with Trump's policies. And people say he's not a well speaker. I don't know. To me, I kind of liked that because I was not fluent in the political arena. Clearly he wasn't, but certainly he is a businessman nonetheless. And I don't know. I was attracted to his agenda and just watching the current events, I was really concerned. And then with um, having children, having a family, and at that time, my grandbabies weren't born yet, but the promise of having a growing family, I just didn't like the direction the country was going in. So when President Trump started soliciting for that J6 day, I mean, you could not flip through any social media without seeing an ad or a little snippet of, why you needed to come, and that it really focused on the election. It focused on, right, because at that point they were still contesting the election,
Hmm.
fraud, and strongly believing that President Trump won again. Um, I think that's where he rallied the people. And he always, when he rallied you in a patriotic way, in my opinion. That's how I felt. I felt more prideful of the flag when I seen it. Not that I didn't respect the flag before and what it stood for, or respected the military. I don't know. Just during his term, I started to respect the veterans more, the patriotic meaning of what the flag really means. Um, and it was all through anything he presented. It made me stop and pause and forced you to look at current events, because he was constantly calling out the corruption, the fake news. And then when the election was contested and it didn't make sense because just even people that I knew, the majority of the people were voting for him, and publicly, you knew who they were voting for. I was like, how in the world did our election get stolen? Like it just didn't make sense to me, regardless of what they showed on TV. And then when they started to um, censor people, before January 6th, you saw a little taste of the censorship happening, with various political people that were starting to speak up about the election fraud, the discrepancies in their states. Um, it then prompted me to watch the Congress hearings. I've never sat through any of that. But it was during that time that I started watching on social media. I'd pull it up on a podcast or a live or whatever, and paying attention to what was happening in Congress. And then when I saw how they were treating each other, Democrats versus Republicans, I was like, oh my goodness, like I had no idea. So that started to open up my eyes. And then when the president would bring up certain topics, I was then able to relate it to something I may have heard in the congressional hearings, um, or especially Marjorie Taylor Greene. I say she's my people. I like her boldness. She doesn't mix words. She's very much like President Trump. Apparently, I'm attracted to someone like that rather than somebody who is more polished and it seems like
Like,
it's scripted, right? It just
yeah,
seems fake and not genuine.
yeah,
Um, because as humans, it's genuine. It's when you make mistakes, it's just the right thing to own it and fix it. So I don't know. I'm just really attracted to uh, I don't really care so much about the delivery being a little choppy. But so, yeah, just following current events and paying attention to what President Trump was trying to warn us about,
Hmm.
election integrity issues. Even during General Flynn, I mean, I started paying attention to all of that, and I'm like, gee, that didn't make sense. And
Didn't
then,
feel right.
yeah, exactly. And again, if you go back and look at um, President Trump's mostly pre-January 6th, if you pay attention to what he's talking about, either at the Tarmac or um, at really any of his contents, he's telling you if we're listening, he's really telling you the problems
Hmm.
our country is having. And sometimes I think if he did clean up his delivery a little bit better, maybe some people wouldn't be so easily offended, or I
I think
kind
it's
of
an
debated
advantage
with
for him
that.
though, right? Because I think people
What's
then
that?
underestimate him. And I think it's obviously it's something that has worked for him. And I'm sure that he's certain he's smart enough to change it if he thought it was a good idea. So,
Yeah. Fast forward, I think the man is a lot smarter than we all gave him credit for. So he did, I mean, that's his business is, the propaganda of his network,
mhm,
promoting things, whether it be his golf courses, his casinos, his TV production. I mean, he's very good at what he does. He wouldn't be as wealthy as he is. So when he advertised for January 6th, I was trying to see if I could find some old clips that when you heard it, you heard the desperateness that it was important to be there. And he even said that. And I was trying to find his exact words, but he said, you have to be there, that our country was in dire straits,
mhm,
and that until we fix the elections, um, he just was trying to really promote that we needed to be there and we needed to um, gather as one.
mhm.
And yeah, and we had to fight for the election that was stolen from us. So um it's funny because normally my husband and I would travel together, but even though he was a fan of President Trump, he didn't feel as led to go there. Like he's like, nah, I'm not interested in that. So then I was going to drive down myself. That's how important it was to me.
Mhm.
I never met him. I didn't know him, but the urgency to be there because he asked us to be there. He
Mhm.
needed the numbers there. Um, I was going to travel myself, and my husband's like, "You're not traveling yourself." So I then called my cousin, and I said, "Hey, Joe," I said, "I'm going to DC for J6." I said, "Do you want to go?" She goes, "Yeah, I want to go." So originally the plan was her and I were going to drive down. And then when there started to be some concerns on the internet, right? Because that's what the deep state does, is
Right.
they had to set up their plan of what they were going to do for the insurrection piece, in my opinion. So they had to put fear in people,
Mhm.
and never experiencing tragedy to that magnitude, or like I didn't have fear.
Mhm.
I kind of disregarded anything I heard on TV and on the internet. So my husband, on the other hand, was very concerned, and rightfully so. He didn't
As it
want me to
turns
put,
out.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He didn't want me to be in a position and him being so far away. And
Hmm.
of course, you can't travel and carry. So that the only thing we could bring was mace, which we did. at his request. That was his thing. If you're going,
Okay.
you're taking this. And I had a tracker on my phone.
Okay.
So yeah, so my cousin and we were ready to go by car. And then she found a bus trip
Okay.
that was leaving out of Norwich. And I said, oh, let me see if I know who it is who's running it. And I ended up not knowing the person at that time anyway. And I was able to get several seats because it was myself, my cousin, and then she had two employees from EB that went as well. So we were able to take the last of the seats, and we met at, it was like midnight. We left at like midnight, 12:30 in the morning, and all three buses were packed full. And because I like to find out who people are and what they're about, I was amazed at how many nurses from Bacchus Hospital
Wow. Okay.
that were on the bus.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a couple of veterans were on the bus. But what impressed me the most was how many women. I'm like, wow, we are freedom fighters. And a little bit disappointing because, if you watch a lot of the podcasting back then, it actually talked about the lack of response from men.
Hmm.
And I thought that was interesting. I want to say it was General Flynn. I don't know that for sure, but I want to say it was some piece I watched about, um, because there's so much demasculinity of our men right now, right? With the
Mhm.
whole transgender and,
Yeah.
there are, our military has seen a huge decrease in enlistments. I think it was the lowest ever during the last administration.
Yeah.
So
They're
it kind of
making up
makes
for it
sense.
now. They're making up for it now. Yay.
They sure are. Yes, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I just saw the study on that with Pete Hegseth, and removing the DEI stuff out of government and federal funding. That was a huge reason why I think the military is back to being, what do they say? Peace through strength, war fighters.
Yeah.
I like that whole analogy because
Hmm.
we are a peaceful group of people, but don't piss us off.
Yeah. That's as it should be. If you're not strong enough to defend yourself, then you're just weak. You're not moral. You have no moral high ground. If you lack the capability to defend yourself, you lack a moral high ground. You're just weak. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. But there was like I said, a majority of the buses were women. Probably, I would say within our age, I would say 50s,
Hmm.
60s. I did see a couple of what I would consider elders. They appeared to be in their 70s, and um, come to find out, he had a Vietnam hat. So probably pushing more towards late 70s, but he did serve in Vietnam. I forgot his name, but I do recall him being on our bus. And then on the way down, there's something about, the Patriots. I met you at Cadillac Ranch, that group of people. When you're around other patriots, it doesn't matter if you don't know a soul in the room. I
Hmm.
just find that to be engaging.
Hmm.
You have the patriotism in common, right? The love for our country and freedom fighting, all, so there you have three things already in common. And the energy is just, it's amazing. So I always try to encourage people, if you want to be around some good souls, be around patriots, because
Yeah.
it's an amazing group. So the atmosphere, you would think people would be tired because we were leaving in the middle of the night, but people had an energy that was just as I was describing. We couldn't wait to see our president speak, And there was a pastor lock that I wanted to hear, that I was following for a little while. And I couldn't wait to get down there. And we did, I think we did a couple of contests, um, like trivia stuff on the bus, which was
Mhm.
fun. It had a lot to do with history and then what we knew about President Trump. So that was fun. And then we had a leader on the bus who basically was just to make sure to check who's sitting next to you so that when you got back on the bus, it was easier to detect if somebody was missing
Right.
in the event if the bus monitor was detained or lost a list or whatever. So the energy was very exciting. We could not wait to get down there. People, obviously, when you look through the bus, it was a lot of red, a lot of red, a
Uh-huh.
lot of patriotic colors, flags. People had flags,
Yeah.
and um, we did all have our masks with us because, of course, it was during COVID.
Right.
So if we, even though most of us, I think is a fair statement, did not feel the masks work, but we all brought a mask so that we were not
Just in
excluded
case.
from,
Right.
exactly. So people had their masks. And then what was interesting was our bus had technical issues and we got detained. That put us out over an hour and a half, I would say. So people on the bus were really, they went from being lovely patriots to really upset because we knew we were going to miss President Trump speaking.
Oh,
And that was the whole reason why we went down there.
right.
So our bus, because the other bus continued on, um, was delayed. Now, in hindsight, I'm thinking that probably was divine intervention because knowing what took place, um, I just think it probably protected us from bad things that we weren't supposed to be subjected to. That's how I look at it because it really didn't make sense. The bus never really broke down, but the hydraulics slowed us down in getting there quicker.
Hmm.
So we missed the parade part, which ended up being uh, not the parade we thought it was going to be anyway. So that was good because Trump was supposed to walk from one end
Okay.
of, I think, Constitution Plaza all the way down to the Capitol. But
So he didn't, so tell me, how was that different? But what were you expecting and what actually happened?
yeah, so we were expecting to go there, listen to him speak, and they had other speakers before him to get people, like a concert, to
Right.
get people pumped up. So we totally missed all that because of our bus. And then Trump was supposed to walk Constitution Avenue with the people to the Capitol for when Pence we were to find out how the voting went.
Right. The official statement about
The
that
official, yeah, I forgot what it's called offhand.
declaration.
Um, yeah, so the certification of the election.
Yes. Yes.
So they, there was some type of security, we found out on through the internet, of course. There was some type of a security concern, so Trump did not make that walk. And then that was the last we heard about him or from him. And then we got dropped off right at the Capitol. And the next thing I observed, which was you couldn't help but notice it, were the amount of Asians that were there hitting Christian tracts. And in case people don't know what a tract is, it's almost like a little Bible, sharing God's word.
Hmm.
Um, but I thought it was interesting because I didn't realize that the Asian culture were as Christian as this crowd seemed to be.
Hmm.
So they were not only handing out these tracts, but they were handing you a paper handout warning you about communism.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
yep. And I was like, wow, what a, in hindsight, like, I remember seeing that, but I didn't really think much about it other than, wow, there's a lot of them. But now I think differently of that and how prevalent that message is to what we're facing today.
Yep.
But yeah, and then we walked onto the green. There were no, there was fencing, but when I say fencing, it was flimsy, like you see construction fencing,
Hmm.
like plastic,
Right.
uh, not sturdy fencing to keep people out. It was more, to me, it looked more like a guide. And then there was a huge entryway into the Capitol grounds, which if you're not familiar with what the grounds look like, it's pretty big. I mean, it would have to be big for how many people it held, but I don't know how many acres, but it's big. It held a lot of people. And there was a huge entryway. So it's not like you were stomping over, you know, in no way did I think you weren't supposed to go on the green. There were no signs saying you couldn't, there were no guards. Um, and then when we got onto the green, by this time, the events at the other end of the plaza were already over with. And now you had the large crowd that was down there coming up to the Capitol. So I don't know how many people were there, but if I had to guess, there had to have been at least a million. It looked like it was incredible. And what else stood out to me while we were having fun taking pictures and talking to various people, again, these were all people in patriotic clothing or red. It was a sea of red, a lot of red and patriotic wear, flags, a lot of Stop the Steal flags, and a lot of American flags. So then it was told to us that uh, Pence did not vote the way we thought he would. So we were expecting him, because of the complaints from the other states, um, Pence was obligated, Vice President Pence was obligated to suspend the certification of the election. And if
Yes.
I, yeah, he's supposed to suspend it for 10 days.
Hmm.
Because there were contested states
Hmm.
and the irregularities being reported by the congressmen and women from various states and districts within the states, he had an obligation to suspend the election, a
Hmm.
certification of it for 10 days, so that a proper investigation could be done. So it was at that point when we found out that he certified the election,
Hmm.
out in the crowd, you heard what I know now to be agitators. People were yelling stuff out about this is our house and like taking over. You heard chatter that you didn't hear before. I mean, we already knew our election was stolen before the certification.
Okay.
So,
Right.
um, we just, it was weird because the very next thing I noticed was, after the crowd found out that the election was certified, the next thing that happened was tear gas was launched out into the green.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, and then the very next thing I noticed, right here we are during COVID, you have people with masks, regular masks. All of a sudden, I'm there, who the hell thinks to bring a gas mask to this type of event,
Right.
right? So when you see my pictures and videos, as a matter of fact, I took a picture of the guy right in front of me And when you look at his eyes, he did not look like someone you should mess around with. And I blew the picture up purposely to see if I could figure out who he was. But yeah, like you knew something was wrong, obviously. You're like, why the heck are they launching tear gas out into a crowd of people? Because at that point, there was no what I'll call breaching.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody going up the stairs. You
Uh-huh.
saw some bad actors climbing the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you look at my pictures, I want to say it's like two people trying to climb the wall.
Uh-huh.
Now I know why that was done, but I remember that being weird. And then you had these young guys that climbed a tree that literally was right next to me. And I believe one of my films captures him in the tree. And I'm like, what are we in school? Thinking that. Like, why are we climbing a tree? We're adults here. And then the more I kept looking, I noticed these groups of people that were pushing their way through the crowd while the tear gas is finally starting to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of a sudden, once it started to clear away, and these people that looked like they didn't belong, they looked more military-ish, um, more more militia, I should say, not military, because they didn't have, they didn't look military. They looked more missionary, like a militia group. So um, I remember seeing that, and my pictures and videos captures that as well. If anyone's ever interested in looking at them, I prefer to do it in person. I don't like to share what's on my phone. So yeah, so it was the most bizarre thing, because then after the tear gas dissipated, and boy, I've never been in the military or ever been subjected to anything like that. And even your COVID mask, I had to pull my hat off and put that layer over. Then I had to take my winter coat and even put that over. And I still had trouble in my throat and breathing. I felt bad for anybody that did not have layers of something to put over their mouth and stuff. So then as soon as it just started to clear, so you could see the amount of people that were there, the next thing that happened, and I didn't know what it was until we got on the bus, um, and the veteran that was on the bus told us, but your insides actually shook. And come to find out, it's a military electronic pulse that they send out for crowd control.
Ah,
And
okay.
luckily for me, I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm almost positive the person that was, they were a little ways away from us, but all of a sudden you heard somebody scream, and apparently that person had a defibrillator.
Oh, oh dear.
Yeah, and the person ended up dying.
Wow.
That person ended up dying. So that was one of the deaths. And I didn't know the person's name, but it's been told that they counted that death as somebody that was injured from the insurrection. But
Mm.
anybody that had a pacemaker or compromised in any way, I mean, something like that. I mean, it shook the inside of your organs. It was the weirdest feeling. And I didn't understand that. And then as soon as that happened, then the very next thing that happened was my friend Kevin called me, who does podcasting. He had a show, and I took the phone call because he knew I was going to go to DC. And he was like, "Oh my God, Dawn, can you go live? They just said there was an insurrection. And are you all right?" And he's going on and on. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
As soon as so it was reported on the news that there was an insurrection. Nobody had gone up the stairs at that point, but we
Wow.
had just had tear gas and the rubber
Wow.
bullets. That was the other thing that got shot out into the crowd, rubber bullets. And you
Wow.
saw people being severely injured that were innocently standing in the lawn. There was no walking up to the Capitol at that point. Everybody was in the lawn having a wonderful day. So, well,
Until they
until
got
we
tear
got,
gas.
yeah, until the tear gas came. So then the rubber bullets, that was horrendous to see people getting hit with that. I mean, this one guy had a bloody face. I want to say my video captured that as well. Um, so then my phone cut out in the middle of my friend calling me.
Mm,
And then all of us, like when you have all those phones go out and you hear people say, I just lost my call.
hmm.
Like it's amazing when you have that many people that you knew everybody's phones were cut out. It wasn't just a technical problem you had. And then it was, I have the timestamp on my phone still because I snapshot a picture of it. The next thing that happened was an alert went out. And again, you have about 1 million people there, and that alert goes off on your phone. It was amazing how loud that sound was. And the alert was from the mayor telling you it was time stamped January 6th, that you had to be out of DC by 6 p.m., out of the capital area by 6 p.m. Actually, no, it was all of DC. Um, by 6 p.m. And what was interesting to me is they always say in the conspiracy world that their numbers are always satanically linked. And I took a screenshot of it because it was the very first thing I noticed. January 6th at 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. was the curfew. So you had to be out of that area by 6 p.m. or you would be arrested. You would be detained. So at that point, I want to say it was about three-ish,
Hmm.
3 o'clock. I'd have to look at the timestamp. Um, that all of a sudden, because of how many people were there, and you still had instigators in the crowd trying to get you to be mad
Hmm.
about how Pence voted. But anybody that's been to any patriotic rally or whatever, that's just not who we are as a whole. We're just not like that. People are not vicious people as a majority that I've experienced in my world anyway, and certainly not at any of these rallies, despite the things we're called
Right.
and the president we back, right? We've
Hmm.
we've taken a lot to support President Trump. So these people that were in the crowd, they looked different, they acted different. You knew they were bad actors. You knew that they weren't part of your people. So they were trying to agitate you and telling you, this is our house. We have to take our country back. They were just saying a lot of aggressive things. Well, because of how many people were there and these bad actors, they started to move the crowd. Like the only way you were going to get off the green, because we were kind of in the middle,
Hmm.
was you were going to have to follow the crowd because
Right.
it would have been very difficult to move your way back. And so the crowd pushed you forward. And then before you knew it, you were going up the stairs. So because the inauguration was going to be happening in a couple of weeks, they had the scaffolding
Hmm.
to the right of the stairs at the Capitol. And then I noticed, I have pictures of it too. I have posted it on social media. I always thought it was weird that a Canadian flag, strictly Canadian, there was a gentleman at the top of the scaffolding with a Canadian flag.
That is
Fast
very
forward, I now think it was a marker. Right. I think it was a marker because how are you going to easily be seen if you have an American flag, right? Because that's
small.
all you saw, or
Okay,
a
that
Trump
makes sense.
flag, or
That makes sense.
right. Yeah. So that scenario made sense to me that that guy played a role somehow because it was so obvious and it made no sense to anybody that follows President Trump or the MAGA movement. Why do we have a Canadian flag at our capital? That's just not who we are. So I have pictures of that. And then as we started to go up, this beautiful American flag, it was the largest I've ever seen. If I had to guess, there were probably 10, 15, maybe even 20 people carrying it. They carried it properly. It wasn't touching the ground. So they had it kind of lifted up and then long. I mean, you take that many people. Well, they passed us on the stairs to go up to the Capitol. Again, we did not cross over any fencing. There was no indication that we were not allowed to be up there. Because I'm a rule follower. So if we weren't allowed to be there, I can assure you I
You
would
would have
not
been
be there.
triggered.
Yeah, exactly. So we start to go up the stairs, and then I have a video. The people carrying the flag started singing a patriotic song. And you even hear me in the video say, I'm singing the song, and then I forgot what the next words were. And then I start laughing, and I said, look how patriotic I am. I don't even know the next verse. And then in the video, it was playful. It was my cousin Josephine and this woman I met on the bus. Her name is Donna. She asked if she could pal around with us because she came up by herself
Mhm.
from the other end of the state. So that's what I mean. Like these women, and it's not because, certainly not because they think Donald Trump is sexy. It's not that. Yeah, I can assure you it's not that. Just so you know, we're not a bunch of you know,
Right.
yeah. So you just felt the urgency and the patriotic need to be there. And so I met this woman, Donna, and it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time when the insurrection was called, but I get to the top of the stairs and you hear me say, because it's a lot of stairs and you had to get through a lot of people. And you hear me say, look at us three old ladies storming the Capitol,
Oh,
not knowing,
right,
right? And
right.
not knowing that those words were going to be very famous one day. So when I got to the top of the Capitol, it occurred to me because everybody fanned out
Mhm.
and went different ways. People were orderly. A lot of them, like myself, when we got up to the top, the very first thing you want to do is take a picture
Oh, yeah, of
down to
course.
the Washington Monument, right?
Yeah.
Because the site is just so beautiful, and to see that many people on the grounds, it you just saw people pulling out their cameras, and it's so different than what they showed on TV. And so I'll walk you through the rest of the day before I tell you my insight to it all. But so we get up to the top, and I said to my cousin, something's wrong. I said, because it just occurred to me that the vote just happened, and
Mhm.
I'm there. How are we able to walk? This many people, how are we able to walk up here? Where are the police?
Right.
Where are the Capitol Police? For this many people, where's the
There
military?
should have been some kind of crowd control, go this
Yes,
way.
there was none, Selena, not one in sight. Yeah. And then we got to the famous door where supposedly Ashley Babbitt was killed.
Hmm.
And we had literally, on the way up, had just heard that supposedly a woman got killed there. And then we started to walk by the door and it was open. And it wasn't like there was a pile of people going in. It was
Hmm.
like if you were at the library and somebody, greet you at the door type, like it was that type of entry. Somebody supposedly was just shot there and there was nobody there. So
Hmm.
then, yeah. So you could easily walk in. Well, my cousin, she's more of a rebel than me. She wanted to go in and she goes, come on, let's go in. And literally, where the door is right there. And
Right.
I looked at her and I said, I carry a license to carry. I'm an insurance agent. I hold another Connecticut license. I said, there's something wrong here.
Uh-huh.
There's something wrong. And I said, no, I'm not going in there. And she grabs my coat and starts to pull me towards the door. And I'm like, I'm not going in. There's something wrong. I said, I'm getting out of here. We have a curfew anyway. I wanted to see the other side of the Capitol to take more pictures. And as we started to walk by, this strange woman stopped us. She was smoking a cigarette. And I don't know, she was acting weird, but a motherly-ish looking woman. And she said, I just heard a woman was shot and killed, and my daughter's in there. And my cousin and I looked at each other and we were like, this is weird. Because if that was her kid, why is she sitting? Like the whole thing was just weird. So we looked at each other and then we just ignored her and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we walked all the way around to the other side of the Capitol where supposedly all these people were as well. It was empty. We were able to exit that way
Mm-hmm.
easily. And you can see in my video where even the walkway that takes you out towards the, uh, I think it's the Congressional Library or something across the street, a library, and I forgot what the, oh, sorry. I forgot what the other building is, but there were hardly any people on that side of the Capitol. So we exit and then we find out the seriousness, right? Because none of us really have access to news because our phones were shoddy. We
Right.
did get cell service back, but it was very shoddy. Like you couldn't place a call, it would quickly disconnect. You certainly couldn't get on the internet or anything. And so we're trying to get back to our bus, which was, I want to say 4 to 5 blocks away. And now you have these aggressive people driving by you and they know who you are because you're in patriotic colors. So they know what crowd you're with and what crowd you're not with. And they would drive by you and it was us three ladies walking back to the bus. And that was the first time I was scared
Mm-hmm.
because you had these cars pulling up to you with three, one of them had a full car, 4 men in the car. They did not look nice. They looked very aggressive. They were saying very vulgar things about you, about President Trump, about being there. And it was nerve-wracking. And we just tried to keep our head down. And eventually the cars went away from us because I think the more we started to catch up with other people,
Mm-hmm.
right, you're better in bigger numbers. So, but it was scary. That was the only time I was scared to be there. And then when we finally got to the bus, it took us quite a while to get there. So it was very close, like within 10 to 15 minutes of the 6 o'clock curfew.
Mm-hmm.
So we were trying to make sure everybody was accounted for. And wouldn't you know it, the one person that we did not want to leave behind was the veteran, the Vietnam veteran.
Oh.
He was older and
Uh-huh.
he was a Vietnam vet, and we weren't leaving him behind.
Right.
So a police car, Washington police, pulled up to our bus because now it was 6:05.
Right.
And they were not nice. The Capitol Police were not nice at all. And we even tried to explain to him it was an older gentleman, a Vietnam veteran. We're trying to reach him, and they were, I
Oh.
would say that that police officer was just as vulgar as the gentlemen that were, trying to intimidate us. So that was disappointing, right? Because that's somebody of authority. Um, Clearly you can tell we weren't rioters or aggressive people. Majority of the people on the bus were women. I mean, you can't get much less threatening than that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a little disappointing. And then eventually the gentleman came on the bus and we ended up leaving. Once we got out of the area, we were able to get our cell service back where we could start finding out what the heck was going on.
Okay.
And you should have heard the bus all the way back. Nobody slept that I know of.
Wow.
We were getting phone calls from family members wondering if we were okay.
Wow.
And yeah, my own father called me up screaming at me because I never told my parents. You know, at the time I was 55 years old. I need to tell my parents where I'm going, but my parents found out. Yeah, my parents found out I was down there, and
Did your
that's a
husband
whole.
tell?
No, no, he didn't even know what happened until I called him because he doesn't watch the news.
Oh,
So, yeah, and when my father found out, it really destroyed my relationship with my parents, and that's a whole nother podcast. But
oh,
we've since kind of made up, but it's amazing the power TV has over even people that should know you,
yeah,
love you unconditionally, and trust you.
yeah,
So it's that day ruined a lot of lives, a lot of lives. It divided. It was in my opinion, the biggest division day was January 6th. And I told people that that day changed my life forever because, like I told you, I'm a person that respects my elders.
mm,
I'm a person that respects the chain of authority. Um, I'm usually a rule follower. If I even break any rule, I'm the type that feels guilty and ends up, not being a rebel anymore. It's just not how I roll. But since that day, I was able to start connecting the dots to what President Trump tried warning us about. And when I saw how heavily we were all being censored and treated, it didn't make sense to me. And I said, can somebody please help me make sense as to why my pictures and videos that are dated and timestamped, where I walked from one side of the Capitol to the other side, why does it not match what they showed us on TV?
mm,
Somebody please explain that to me.
right.
So then that's when I started to be more vocal. And it wasn't until I actually had to take myself off of social media for I did it for about 4 days, I think it was, just
Hmm.
because it's addicting, right?
Yeah,
It is for me anyway. But I went completely off because people I have known most of my life said some really bad things and called me very bad things because in their eyes, we are an insurrectionist and we are, you
yeah,
know, we intentionally hurt people and we were anti-government and blah, 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 blah. Nothing new, I'm telling you, but how they made us feel was often coming from people we love. And it's sad. And that day was, I think that day served two purposes. I think in hindsight, it was good versus evil. I
mm,
think President Trump, I think there is something to be said about an alliance, a world alliance that is taking out the cabal because I think it's not done by mistake that President Trump rallied us there, a
mm,
lot of us there.
mm,
And I don't think it was a mistake that supposedly the laptops were stolen at the Capitol. I
mm,
think they call it what, white hats, black hats. But I really do believe that based on what I experienced, because you saw the only what looked like police, and now I'm questioning how could it be Capitol Police?
mm.
the police that I did see, you capture in my video, because I was filming all the way out and not knowing the severity of what was being portrayed on TV.
Hmm.
Um, I just am someone who takes a lot of pictures and videos. So as we were exiting the Capitol, we were already off the green. We were getting ready to cross the road to get to our bus. And I saw a seat bus, and my video captured the seat bus. And then I looked and I'm like, wow, that looks like police officers or
Hmm.
people of authority. They had black jackets on with yellow, uh, like a yellow stripe, safety stripe or something on their coat. And the whole bus was full of these people, and they never ever exited the bus.
Hmm.
There was not one picture or video on my camera, my cousins, my friend Donna. The three of us collaborated looking at our stuff, and no police presence. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So yeah, that whole day, for me, changed my life forever. And then I find out, several months later, I end up doing the Marjorie Taylor Greene event in Connecticut. I was presented an opportunity, um, by my friend Kevin, actually, the one I was doing the podcast with,
Oh, okay.
from Washington, D.C. He, um, met up with Marjorie's team and said, Dawn, you are a great event planner. Do you think you could host MTG in Connecticut? It'll be a blast because we're such a blue state.
Mhm.
Although I don't think we are all a blue state. He said it would be a fun thing to do. And and that's where that blossomed from. So it was when I had the Marjorie Taylor Greene event, in October of that year of 21, I found out that, um, the mother and daughter that were on my bus were the ones that got incarcerated and arrested by the FBI. And so she sent a neighbor to the Marjorie Taylor Greene event and handed me an envelope from her. Her name's Jeannie, wanting me to give this letter to MTG because her and her daughter were arrested by the, FBI. They were dragged out of their house. The poor daughter was 17 at the time, I believe, and dragged out of the house in her underwear. I mean, is that necessary?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just,
Mhm.
how they had to portray that day, they had to make us look like we were the worst of the worst. And you're talking about innocent people whose lives were destroyed for the evil purpose of stealing our election. And yeah, that's the short version of my story. It changed my life forever. It's, what makes me passionate about, calling out local corruption.
Mm.
I still believe it needs to be done in a proper manner. As you know, I was advocating for John Flynn, and, who was arrested for being a whistleblower in Connecticut. I find his content to be, relevant enough to Connecticut citizens should be looking into some of his whistleblowing, uh, research because it's of great concern as a Connecticut taxpayer. So, you it the passion from that day really inspired me to do something on a local level. So when I found out about John Flynn, I met him at the Marjorie Taylor Greene event, actually, him and his dad. And, I remember John telling me that his father, who was 82 at the time, I think, was, the number one Republican, donator in Connecticut. I
Huh.
don't know how you know that, but I guess he donates a lot of money to various people, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of his favorites. So he brought his dad, and that's where I met John, and we've done some political events together. But when I saw what the corruption that John was trying to expose, and then I had that connection with him from the event, and then him and I went to the Alex Jones case when it was held in Connecticut in Danbury, and then we went to General Flynn's um, dinner reception up in New Hampshire. He was supporting General Bolduc, who was running for Senate, I believe, in New Hampshire. Um, I met up with John there by coincidence. So him and I, our paths have crossed quite a bit. So when I saw that he had a need, um, ever since J6, I'm just inspired to do my part, whatever that is. And I knew I could help John with the fundraising efforts. Uh, Once he made the decision to retain an attorney, I had just asked him if you put up half the retainer, that I would try to fundraise the other half, that I have amazing patriots that I've met in this movement
Mhm.
that are all about freedom fighting. And even if they didn't know John, many of the donations we have, they don't even need to know John. They just need to know that his civil rights were violated,
Mhm.
his First Amendment, his Fourth Amendment, his 14th Amendment. And when they check his content, whether they agree with his avenue of trying to seek justice or not,
That
they
shouldn't
were
matter.
all about, yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
shouldn't matter.
exactly.
Yeah, shouldn't matter. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And we know,
So,
there is plenty of evidence now that there is a ton of voter fraud. I don't know if you're familiar with United Sovereign Americans, which I often mention in this podcast because I want everybody to know about it. I also interviewed Linda from the Fight Voter Fraud organization, and she's been
oh,
through the
yes,
voter
I
rolls.
met her.
Yeah, she's been through the voter rolls in Connecticut, and they are a mess. United Sovereign Americans has also been through the voter rolls, and we have 58,000 more votes were certified than there are voter records.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
when looking at the voter records, it's obvious that dead people are voting, just for starters. So, I mean, people are very concerned about whether or not people who are illegal are voting. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It can be inactive voters, it can be dead people, it can be people who moved away, it could be people who literally moved from one town to the other and then are voting twice, because that happens too.
right,
There was a lot of that.
right.
Um, People
Yeah.
who are
And
voting from
even,
addresses that aren't actually houses. It's like that's their office. Uh,
right. But I think the bigger pill that people need to acknowledge before they can understand the magnitude of election fraud
mhm,
is the reason why the election fraud is being committed,
mhm.
right? Unfortunately, it's predominantly the Democratic side. And that, I've been a longtime Democrat, so up until President Trump. So that's a hard pill to swallow, to think that we are manipulating such a privilege to vote for the sake of putting someone in office that is not the majority's pick.
Mm,
It's being manipulated. So until people realize that we have bad people in local government, even more than national, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's the local races are so bad. And, even back to John Flynn has been calling out election fraud when it was very unpopular. I mean, he was calling it out from 2016. I think I was able to find a video.
Hmm.
And then you have people in his district that to this day are still being arrested because they were found guilty,
Hmm.
registrars that have been found guilty.
Hmm.
And then even John's court appointed attorney, Dennis Bradley is up on charges for election fraud.
I
And
didn't
his
know that. That's
partner,
interesting.
yes, yeah, yes,
Wow.
court appointed attorney for John Flynn. He tried to tell the judge that there was a conflict because John knew,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, it's his district, his
Right.
area. He knows. So he tried to say why he did not want that public defender,
Mm.
and the judge made him take him. And, you know, it's it's a hard pill for people to know we have a corrupt system, but one of the things I will say without going too deeper than that I know I've shared with you, but I do believe that laws and orders, the judicial system, we do have areas of it being corrupt. We do have corrupt doctors, nurses, judges, attorneys, and it's up to us when we see that. It's up to us to fix it. And I just think there's a process to fix it. And I don't think that we should be handling it ourselves. I think we just have to out lawyer people. Um, I know people are trying to bring everything back to a more constitutional way to resolve our grievances. But until we fix the corruption, we have to work within the system that we have. And at this point, we have to out lawyer them. So in John's case, I'm hopeful that, I'm hopeful that the system will fix what went wrong in his case. And I just keep hoping that since January 6th, and we know the corruption's been going on a long time, right?
Yeah.
They say way back to Kennedy and even before that. So
Well, if you
we,
start reading anything about the CIA, and there's some interesting literature out there, expose stuff that is enough to make your hair stand on end.
yeah,
And
exactly.
going back to World War II even. And it's like, oh dear God. And that's probably the nature of power. And people go on and on about, oh, rich people. And it's like, I really don't think it's like, yeah, wealth is attractive, but only to a certain point. Once you get to a certain point, then people are looking at power.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah. And for them to paint our country more recently as racist, entitled people, I'm like, how can you say that? We, as a majority, elected the first Black president. You
Mhm.
are not going to convince me that we as a society are racist people. I mean, most of us are not blue blood anyway. We're
Right.
all multiracial. Yeah, exactly. We're a big melting pot in America. So, you know, again,
If
ever
we are
since
sharing the
January
same
6th,
values, if we're sharing the same values, yeah, we can merge and be a unique collective of people. And that was the whole point, is to be able to get along with the other human beings around us. And I think, historically, when the Constitution was made, I think it was a much bigger deal that there were what do you call them? Congregationalists who were trying to get along with Catholics. And that was just in Connecticut. So, and then there
sure,
were those
sure,
Southern Baptist people. And and these were, we don't look at these differences now and say, oh, they're just Christians. And it's like, no, there were some very profound differences there. And they
sure,
do not appreciate each other's company all the time. But at the same time, they were able to sit down and talk with each other. And the three signers of the Constitution from Connecticut, they were like three different religions, and they each had their own skills, but they were able to sit down and have a conversation with each other
right?
and discuss, how they were going to negotiate those differences. And it's like we've lost a lot of that, and
Yeah,
I would like to get it back. And it is hard because my experience of people, and I've lost friends. I think we all have.
Yeah,
We've just about lost a family member. This is a family member whose daughter has decided to be a boy. And there's a lot of families who have had this experience. And
there
it's
is.
it's like how we're all trying to use logic to try and explain why this is the case, and all you get is that.
Right,
Pieces in front of the
right,
face. It's like whatever you have to say is completely invalid because if you disagree with me, you must be a bad person.
right. But I do, I do understand how we got here.
Mhm.
Um, I think myself included, we all got complacent.
I agree.
We,
I agree.
when people tell us to do something, right? I was just telling you how I have respect for chain of authority. So if a person is going to tell me to mask up, I'm going to mask up.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until the forced vaccinations,
Mm-hmm.
because I was masking up and I was kind of a little freakish about washing my hands, and because I trusted the doctors, I
Right.
trusted what was on the news. And so
Mm-hmm.
I understand why they are the way they are. I don't understand why they don't see it how I see it,
Mm-hmm.
like the government overreach, how they're infringing on the beauty of how our country is the best place to live. I mean, freedom of choice,
Yeah.
freedom, whatever that choice is. So, you know, my own parents, I come from an amazing family, super close, has always been our model. And communicate every day, gather several times a week, was always our normal. And ever since January 6th, and because I did not, myself, my husband, and my kids um, were not vaccinated, you know, and I know I'm not alone in that. I know there's many families with the whole vax conversation, but yeah, yeah. But I mean, to this day, I remember my father said something about President Trump that triggered me because I know my father's not very educated on watching the congressional hearings like I do. I'm almost to the point where I'm obsessed with it. It's more of a, I wish I could turn it off now, but I'm in just such disbelief. We're in this heightened crisis that I'm trying to find answers like everybody else or the people following the movement. But my father said something that really got me mad. And I think it was because I finally reached my point of 4 years saying, Dawn, your father's 88, 85 rather. Your father's 85. It's your father. You know, your mother's not in well shape.
Mm-hmm.
I was constantly shutting up and biting my tongue and
Mm-hmm.
suppressing those things that you normally would go to your parents for. I would have loved to have told my parents what on TV, like have this make sense to me, mom and dad, because my parents are, they have all their faculties. So when my dad triggered me on something he accused President Trump of, and when I believe how hard Trump is working to fix this mess and how we're supposed to do our part locally, my dad triggered me. And I think it was finally that point for me. And I slammed my phone down and I said things to my dad I wasn't very proud of afterwards, but because my delivery was absolutely terrible. That's not how you should talk to your parents. But again, I want people to understand for me, it was the child, frustrated child
Mm-hmm.
just totally losing it to their parents. And I slammed my phone down and said, until you will look at my pictures and my videos, it's been over 4 years and you will not look at these pictures and videos. I
Mm-hmm.
said, until you do, I do not want to hear not one more word. And I said, it has taken everything out of me to come visit you and to talk to you with how you have treated me. Like I said a lot of things that, you can't ever take back, right?
Mm.
So after we got done, after I got done spewing off, I looked right at my mother, who was silent, and I said, "You're supposed to love me unconditionally, and you won't even listen to me. And let me show you what I observed that day." And my mother turned around, looked right at me, and said, "Because we're not ready." I'm there. It's been 4.5 years. Like, what do you mean you're not ready? And it's like, I would like to think that before my parents leave this earth,
Hmm.
that I can at least get the closure, because it's something that it has affected our relationship. I could easily break down right now, thinking about it. That's how close our family once was. And when I say January 6th changed my life forever, it's in a lot of ways, good and bad. I mean, I don't trust anybody. You have to prove you are trustworthy. And to me, that's sad, because it's just not normally who I would be, but it's my new normal. I trust nobody. You have to prove yourself to me. And then once you prove it to me, I'm a loyal dog. I mean, you ever need anything, I'm your person. And, it's sad. And unfortunately, I found in my circle of people, even that I met at the Cadillac Ranch, actually, I met somebody that was on the bus. I didn't know he was my bus leader.
Oh, well.
I met him at the Cadillac Ranch because we started talking about J6, and then we were like, hey, I was there. So yeah, we were able to pinpoint it to the same exact bus. I
Right.
just didn't recognize him. But yeah, it's that day changed a lot of people's lives, good, bad, and
Yeah.
indifferent for sure. But I thank you for letting me share my story, and I hope anybody that was there that day knows that I feel their pain. And there's also an excitement recently, the way General Flynn is talking.
Hmm.
I keep hoping we're going to get justice for January 6th. And when I say justice, I mean arrest the people that caused that chaos.
Yeah.
Arrest them. And if their crimes were worse than just the insurrection, then I'm sorry, but the punishment for treason is execution. And I I'm torn on that, because I always thought I was very much pro-life. So that's something I have to work within myself. But I want justice. It's been, over 4 years, and we have not seen one person held accountable for that day. And
Yeah.
it destroyed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
there's at this point, there's plenty of evidence. Well, yeah, I mean, we're gonna run out of prison cells at this rate. But
yeah.
that was what I think I found most enlightening about your story was just the timing of everything. That your friend contacted you and said, "Oh, there's an insurrection," and you're like, "What insurrection? What are you talking about here?" Um, so yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
when you
this
think insurrection, it's,
so this has been great, and maybe we'll have you come back on, and we'll find something else interesting to talk about because it's been really
yes. Thank
cool.
you for having me, Selena.
So, all right, everybody, this is the Connecticut Common Sense Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend.